Namaste. Welcome again to the learning session of EduVaried Kids. We as an organization have been trying hard to bring a lot of important things to parents as well as teachers, because we know it's not only important to increase the skills of the child, but at the same time it's also very important to assess up to what extent our child has actually achieved in those skills. Therefore, today we are going to discuss various mechanisms and various ways that we can do those assessment in the preschool years, so that we are more than 100% clear that whatever is required for our children to achieve in those formative years, they are having all the required skills and they are not deprived of anything which is very essential for their future growth. So now question comes, why it is very essential to have a regular assessment of skills among preschool children? Now, we have been discussing one aspect of early child development, that is the pace of growth and development among the preschool children in their formative years, which is basically 2 years to 6 years. Now, if you look to various research that has been conducted for the overall skill development as well as brain development in particular, then the pattern shows in the beginning it grows very high, then after some time it normalizes and falls to a certain minimum level and gets stagnant over there. In other words, what it is meaning, when the child grows in the age, then there is a sensitive ear and sensitiveness in the child's understanding of various skills, and based on that the child receives and captures those skills. But as per the brain development, as per the various things the child get exposed to, by the time child gets 3.5 years to 4 years, that sensitive period is very high. Meaning at that point of time, child is expected to get all the skills at a rapid pace as compared to further years. So if you look to the research and the study, it shows that by the time child is 5 years or 5.5 years, there is a stagnancy in terms of getting the skill and utilizing those skills for further development of the child. Therefore, it is very important that we should know that what skill we are bringing to our child and whether the child is able to have those skills or not. That's why it's very important, and this particular aspect we have been discussing for quite some time. That's why most of the parents by the time must be aware that why it is important to have those things. Now, if that is the case of the child, sensitive years are between, let's say, 2 to 4 and 5 years, in those years when the child comes to a preschool setup, for the parents it's very important, as well as for the teachers it's very important to understand why preschools are so important. Preschools are not very important for getting the basics of education. Basic education anyway are provided by parents. Nowadays all the parents, they know that what to be taught. But one thing is that we need to understand, as far as the skill is concerned, every child can be categorized into 4 or 5 categories. Number 1 category of children, they are the fast learners. Whatever skill we try to bring to them, their approach, their intensity to learn those skills are much faster than other children. So those children are categorized as fast learners. Learning becomes very easy for them. It's not at all difficult for them. So they are on an average comprise around 10 to 15% of total children, they fall under the category of fast learner. Now, second category are the normal children. What is expected for them to learn at that particular age, they learn it without much difficulty. So they are the major chunk of the children among any cohort. They form somewhere around 65 to 67% of the total children. They are basically normal children, and they learn everything at that certain pace what is expected for them to learn. For these two group of children, absolutely there is no problem. Any kind of preschool education system they can adapt very well, and they can learn things also as per the expectation. But problem comes for the third category of children who are slow learners. As we have been discussing that there is a developmental process, and for those children the developmental process becomes little slow. They are the learners, they want to learn, and the process or whatever we call that, the brain doesn't permit them to learn things as fast as it happens for normal children or fast learners. So if for a normal or fast learner they take, let's say, 1 hour to learn something, some skill, for the slow learners it may take 5 hours, it may take 6 hours, or sometimes more. So slow learners are the third category of children, and they comprise somewhere around 15 to 17% children are falling under the slow learners. And finally, there is another category, we call it developmental delays. Basically, we have a system to observe various skills. This could be hearing, this could be our 5 senses, there could be overall brain functioning. So these are the normal developmental things that happens when a child grows. When there is a limitation in those growth process, then all the skills attached to those developmental cycle also get slowed down. So when it gets slowed down, then we often call them as developmental delays. If the child's listening power is growing much slower, then as a language and communication skill, we cannot bring a pace which we generally expect for a normal children. So in that case, we call it developmental delays. And autism spectrum and other ADHD, they are various manifestation of these developmental delays. So I understand personally, in preschools, understanding a child's capability to learn skills is very, very important. So in a nutshell, assessment starts from there itself. When a child has to be assessed in various developmental milestones, first and foremost important thing for us to understand if a child is having all the things in as normal as possible. And once we identify which child falls under which category, it becomes very, very easy for either teachers or for parents to make any changes or to formulate a strategy to make them from slow learner to normal or normal to fast learner. So that is one of the important things. And if we need to understand, we should have at least some technique, at least some toolkit which would help us to understand which child falls under which category. That is the first and foremost thing we need to understand. Then only we bring various techniques for the skill development, but we must know where our child stands out. So Educated Kids has designed a toolkit which helps in doing all such kind of activities, and this is going to help in a big way when we work with our children to develop further skills. So we call it the initial assessment. So assessment starts from there itself. Now, once we talk about skills, because we do not have very structured curricular things while we are just focusing too much on the skill development. But at the same time, when preschool children are skilled, whatever we do, that must be very, very structured. As much as skills should be brought into the teaching platform while we deal with any preschool children. So in a nutshell, after assessing the initial skill of a child, when we introduce the child into various learning through activities, through various games, then the curriculum must be well defined through as many skills as we can bring. For example, Eduverate Kids has brought a 20 skill-based curriculum. It talks about skill, skill and skill. Nothing is there just like curricular or other, bookish kind of knowledge. It's all about skill, and the child is skilled enough, then any kind of bookish knowledge or any kind of skill can be plugged into that. So another thing for teachers and for parents to remember is that ensure the curriculum is skill-based and as many skills as possible are brought into that curriculum. Then once this curriculum is designed, we understand a lot of skills are brought into curriculum, developmental skills are there, then we combine both these things and that becomes our objective to bring to a child while we deal with a child in preschool years. So developmental milestone is something to be achieved. Second is curricular milestones that to be achieved. That's where we put together and try to work with a child to bring maximum possible skill-based education to a child. Now, when a child is coming to preschool, there are multiple ways that this developmental milestone and curricular milestone can be achieved. So, one could be the Montessori method. There are many schools there following Froben method. A lot of methods are available across the globe. But important thing is that must be structured well enough so that we know that what to be done and how it has to be assessed. Now, when a child grows from, let's say, from neonatal to toddler to grown-ups, then child grows further, and when the child comes to that age of 6, from birth till reaching to the age of 6, when the brain development becomes quite formative, during this year, various exposure we bring through which the child learns. So that's where the preschool should do. There may be some syllabus-based education or syllabus-based skill building process. There may be some functional games. There may be various activities through which we are trying to develop the skills. So when all these things are brought into preschools, then if assessment is not there, then we exactly do not know where the child is going. How much of the total skill, what we bring under developmental milestone, what we bring under curricular milestones, how much of them the child is learning. So while we expect the skill development will go northward, and we have to make a judgment whether it is going northward or southward, we should have a tool, we should have a technique to say that whether the skill development is happening in the right way or not. As we have been talking, assessment will be possible provided we have a very, very structured teaching in place. Remember, if a structured teaching calendar is not there in place, assessment is never going to be possible. Maybe somebody is saying that we are doing quite a lot of assessment, but you can ask one question: what is the structure in which the teaching is done? If the teaching is not done in a structured way, then assessment cannot be done. And that too, more challenging job is that children between 2 to 6 years, not too much of curricular things, more of kind of developmental milestone. If the structure are not prepared and all the skills are not plugged into those structure, then assessment will be difficult. And without the structure, if we are doing assessment, then it will create further challenges for the child instead of providing support to the child. So it could be any structure. Structure meaning that you should know what to be taught. You are creating a process through which those things are brought into the classroom and those things are exposed to the child, and child learns, so that you know that child has learned all these things. You should assist the child on those basis. So what we have done at Eduvaret Kid to make sure that structure is highly scientific, we have designed a pedagogical process bringing all the small and micro skills into perspective for each class, so that a structure has been created for each week and for each class and for each skill. So you can see on your screen, this is how the pedagogical structure is created, so that once 1 week or 1 month gets over, we know what to be assessed. So for example, you can see this is what we have designed for language and communication skill, and what you can see, this is belong to a particular class for particular week. This whole idea is to show and make sure that such kind of things can be possible. And this is what the same structure, but skill is for cognitive skill, and all the soft skills like recitation, identification, counting and write, and exploration have been put together under this pedagogical thing like learning objective, books and page number, activity number. All these things are brought into a structure. So once this structure is there, the teaching has been done, then assessment will be much easier. Similarly, under this same structure, we have put social and emotional skill, different skills, soft skills under social and emotional skill, but pedagogical process remains the same, and the teaching and skill building are happening in the very, very structured manner. So when this structure is being followed as a part of the teaching procedure in the school, then it becomes very easy to do the skill assessment. Now question comes, at what interval we should do the skill assessment for the child? Various research says that developmental milestone and curriculum milestones are very, very frequent in nature. So on an average, if we look to various research, on an average, around 25 to 30 skills can be brought to a particular child in a particular month. So once those skill development is so fast and child has to go through in a very, very fast pace as well as very, very structured pace, then it is very important to bring some assessment system at a very frequent level. And it should not be that much too frequent that you do not get time to spend with the child to develop the skills. That's why, based on all the literature review, based on all the research that's happening around the globe, we thought at Eduvaret Kids, once in a month skill assessment should be fine enough. And considering that, we at Eduvaret Kids has put the skill assessment for all the years of children, for all the classes. The skill assessment at least should happen once in a month. Once we have decided that, then we have worked on a tool. That tool should be self-explanatory. Tool should be capturing all kind of things, so that parents should know what's happening, teachers should know what has been taught and how the child is doing in terms of those skills, that everything should be captured in that tool. So we have got a monthly assessment tool. So we called is a monthly skill assessment, and that can be done. I am not saying that only Eduvaret Kids is doing that. Any school they can do by their own, but it should be very, very focused. It should be very, very structured in its way. We cannot bring anything haphazardly, so that child's learning process is one way and the assessment is happening another way. It should not happen that way. So a monthly assessment should be sufficient enough to understand and to assess the child's progress in all the skills that's required for making the child highly skillful in the future. And again, everything has to be measured. Skill assessment, when we talk about assessment, end result, it should give some indication. And to have one indication, we should quantify everything. That's very, very important. And that's where preschool education system has to go in that direction. We should know through some quantification where our child is moving. whether it is language skill, whether it is cognitive skill, whether it's a social skill, there are ways we can quantify them. So again, by following some kind of good practices across the globe, we at Eduvarate Kids has designed and developed a very, very structured and nicely formulated quantitative mechanism. Yet it's very easy to understand for the teachers and how to quantify them so that we know and understand how much of the skill the child has achieved against whatever skills that was scheduled for a particular month. So those techniques are very, very important. Schools can have their own technique, but ensure that it should be representative and it should give a direction regarding the skill improvement of the child. And once that monthly assessment is done, it's quantified, it is well presented, important thing comes here is that communicating all these things to parents. Because in a preschool setup, child spends some time in school, maximum time the child spends at home. Parents are the second teachers and they provide informally the much needed education to the child. If parents they do not understand the blending of the developmental milestones and curricular milestones, then the whole process or whole efforts of preschool system will be compromised in some places. That's what my personal belief. And that's the reason I have been advocating in any of the opportunities I get to talk to teachers so that they bring the cohesiveness among parents, and whatever the teacher brings to the child, it must be continued to the parents at home. And that will be only possible if the communication between parents and the teachers are very, very structured. And without having an assessment, the communication cannot be structured. To have a very structured communication between parents and the teachers, we must have a documented assessment system in place. Believe me, without a documented assessment procedure in place, doesn't matter how good you are in communication, you cannot establish a very structured communication with the parents as far as the skill improvement and skill development endeavors of the child is concerned. That's the reason Eduvarate Kids has been talking about documentation is very, very important for the child's development. It's not because that we are noting down something what the child is doing, but also to communicate exactly the same thing to the parents, what the parents can do to continue that education system, that skill building system at home as well. It's very, very important. My humble request and submission to all the parents to ensure that you should have a documented evidence when we talk about the skill development of our child. What skill? If we want to development of any skill of our child, can you make a list of the skills what my child should know? Then it becomes very obvious. I should check my child whether the child has achieved them or not. But without having any documentation, we can tell anything in absurd way, but that will not solve the whole purpose. So that's where it is very, very important for the teachers to communicate proactively with the parents, and it becomes the role of parents to get back to the teachers and ask that what are the things that has already been done in the school. Then once that is done, another important thing in assessment I must bring here is that having a very structured system in place through examination. Our education system is based on final examination or assessment any point of time going further. There are some school of thought, they talk that in preschool years there should not be any examination, formal examination. But when the child gets exposed to some environment and there are no examination, and suddenly from standard 1 child understands there is examination, I have to prepare and go to examination, write it, then it creates a lot of confusion in the mind of the child. if we do not bring in the formative years that practice and that pattern, how come we expect a child will get into a new system and accept those things without much difficulty? It's not possible, because as per the research we discussed in the beginning, by the time child is becoming 6 years, the habitual way of behavior becomes stagnant and becomes solid. We cannot change that. If we do not bring that practice of examination in a very, very happy way, then child is not going to have them in future. So it's very important to establish the midterm and end term exams in the preschool years very, very structured way. It could be anything. It could be you could do the assessment as simple as possible. You can show a ball and ask the child, what is this? That could be one test. But child should know there are situations or there are ways that the child will be evaluated whatever has been taught. If those understanding is there by developing normal synapses in mind, then it becomes very, very helpful for the child when the child grows up and prepares for the higher education. So ensure that a progress report, well-structured progress report is in place. Why I say well-structured progress report? Because that progress report should indicate how the child is growing. It's not like that a grade like A+, or O or B, C grade. It's all about how my child is improving from month 1 to month 2, month 3 to month 4, month 5 to 6, 7, 8. If that progress report can give you that indication, then it's a good progress report. And finally, as I say, we have to prepare the child to accept that practice of examination. We must be having some examination kit which should be very, very structured. It's not like that the teachers are doing anything to just finish that tick mark that, exam things has to be over, but it has to be very, very structured, so that also for the end term examination. Considering all things that we have been discussing, Antivariate Kit has designed and developed a midterm examination kit and end term examination kit, so that all the schools, they can take benefit of bringing the structured thing in place. So once it is structured, then rest of the things will be automatically taken care of. So as a formal examination, we should have a progress report, we should have a midterm examination kit, again documented, and teachers and parents can evaluate and refer to that. Same also for the end term examination kit. Now going further, it's not only that curricular things. It is all about skills. So some of the skills we bring and test in the school, that's fine. Apart from that, there are a number of developmental milestone checklist is available, in different places. Antivariate has done quite a lot of research, and based on that, it has prepared its own checklist. There are international research programs which also bring quite a lot of checklists. For example, preschool and kindergarten behavioral scale, that's a fantastic scale to check the skill improvement of the child. So those skills can also be brought, those checkpoints can also be brought from time to time to check and document them, so that any point of time it can be referred, which will be really useful for the child when the child grows and gets into the senior classes. So these are the various techniques and ways that assessment can be done. And very important to remember, if any preschool education system doesn't have a very structured assessment, then we are missing quite a lot as far as the skill development of the child is concerned. So thank you so much. If you have any specific doubt, you need any support in preparing your own assessment system, or you want to take the assessment system that has already been designed and developed by Antivariate Kits, you are most welcome. You can write us, you can call us, you can WhatsApp us based on the email ID which is reflected on the screen, or you can use these phone numbers which is reflected on the screen and connect us, and definitely would be there to support you to make sure the preschool education becomes very, very special and effective one for your school. Thank you so much.